Chapter 1. The morning sun spilled through the kitchen window, illuminating the clutter of breakfast dishes and scattered toys. Michael stood at the doorway, his duffel bag slung over his shoulder, as he took a deep breath, trying to absorb the familiar chaos of home. The aroma of pancakes filled the air, mingling with the sounds of giggles and the clattering of little feet. "Dad, can you help me tie my shoes?" 6-year-old James called out, his voice laced with urgency. "Coming, buddy!" Michael replied, rushing to his son's side. He knelt down, deftly looping the laces into neat bows while James bounced on the balls of his feet. Lucy, 4 years old, tugged at his pant leg, her big blue eyes shining with a mix of excitement and sadness. "Daddy, are you really going away again?" she asked, her lip quivering ever so slightly. Michael's heart twisted. "Just for a little while, sweet pea. I'll be back before you know it," he reassured her, pulling her into a tight embrace. Brody, the youngest at 2, babbled happily in his high chair, oblivious to the emotions swirling around him. As he finished with James's shoes, Michael glanced at Janice, who stood at the kitchen counter, flipping pancakes with one hand while brushing her hair back with the other. She was a picture of grace under pressure, but he could see the strain in her smile. They had been married for 10 years, and though they had built a loving home together, the reality of his job meant long absences that often left her feeling isolated. "Hey, you're doing an amazing job, you know?" he said, trying to lighten the mood as he stepped up beside her. Janice flashed him a grateful smile, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "I'll manage, just like always," she said softly. "The kids keep me busy." Michael wanted to ease her burdens, to reassure her that she wasn't alone, but the truth was that he would be a world away for 5 months, working as an audiovisual technician on a cruise ship. He was grateful for the income, but each departure felt like a small fracture in their family. "Don't forget, Jelly will be around to help, right?" he reminded her, referring to Janice's sister, who lived next door. They had been inseparable since childhood, sharing a bond that was strengthened by motherhood. Janice often leaned on Jelly for support, especially when Michael was away, and they had even chosen to be neighbors to ensure their kids could grow up close together. "Yeah, she'll help," Janice replied, her tone carrying a hint of uncertainty. "But I wish you didn't have to go." Michael reached out, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "I wish I could stay too. But I'll call every day, okay? And I promise to make it up to you when I get back." As he hugged her tightly, he felt a flicker of apprehension in the pit of his stomach, a sense that the coming months would challenge their marriage in ways he couldn't predict. After a quick breakfast filled with rushed bites and laughter, they gathered their things, the kids buzzing with excitement for their dad's latest adventure. Once they were outside, Michael loaded the car with his suitcase while Janice corralled the kids. James and Lucy chased each other in circles, while Brody clutched his favorite stuffed dinosaur. In that moment, all seemed right, yet the shadow of doubt lingered. Finally, Michael stood beside the car, looking at his family, knowing he had to leave but wishing he could take them with him. "I love you guys," he called, planting a kiss on each of their foreheads. "Love you, Daddy," the kids chorused, their voices bright. Janice stepped forward, wrapping her arms around him once more. "Be safe. We'll be waiting for you," she whispered, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. With one last wave, Michael climbed into the car and drove away, the weight of the world on his shoulders. As he glanced back at Janice, her figure slowly fading from view, an unsettling thought crept into his mind. Would this time apart bring them closer, or would it unravel the threads that held their family together? The cruise ship awaited him, but deep inside, Michael sensed the tides of change stirring back home. Chapter 2. The hum of the cruise ship was a constant backdrop as Michael navigated the narrow corridors filled with crew members bustling about. With each passing day, he immersed himself in his work, adjusting equipment for lavish shows and presentations by trying to drown out the nagging thoughts of home. Yet the further he sailed from the familiar comforts of family, the more he felt the distance settle uncomfortably in his chest. One evening, while reviewing the day's footage in his cramped cabin, his phone buzzed with an incoming message. Glancing down, he recognized the name, Jake, a close friend from back home. Michael's heart raced slightly. Jake always had a knack for sharing the latest news, but he wasn't prepared for what awaited him in that text. "Hey man, heard some disturbing rumors about Janice and Ben. You might want to check it out. Just saying." Michael's stomach dropped. The world around him faded as he stared at the screen, replaying the message in his mind. Janice? Ben? The brother-in-law who had always been more like a friend than family? It couldn't be true. He knew them both well. They were family, intertwined in their lives in ways he had always considered comforting. The idea felt impossible. Shaking his head, he paced his cabin, running his fingers through his hair. It must be a misunderstanding. Ben had always been there for Janice, helping out with the kids or offering to fix things around the house, but he had never sensed any inappropriate chemistry between them. "Ben's just being a good brother-in-law," he muttered to himself, trying to convince himself of that fact. But doubts wormed their way into his mind, and the gnawing unease only grew stronger. He thought back to the last few months before his departure. Had he missed something? Had Janice acted differently around Ben? He closed his eyes, trying to recall specific interactions, but nothing stood out as suspicious. After a restless night filled with visions of betrayal and heartache, Michael wrestled with the question of what to do next. Should he confront Janice? He could call her right now, demand answers, and let her know he was aware of the whispers behind her back. But what if the rumors were false? What if he ruined their marriage over a baseless accusation? The thought of returning home sent a shiver down his spine. He still had 3 months left on his contract, and breaking it could jeopardize his career. But the thought of Janice being unfaithful while he was miles away felt like a betrayal in itself. He sank onto his bed, staring at the wall. He needed to know the truth, but feared the repercussions of finding it. Would he finish his contract, remaining in blissful ignorance, or would he head home and confront the storm brewing on the horizon? Finally, Michael made a decision. He'd hire a private investigator. He needed proof, or at least something that would clarify the rumors before he made any rash moves. This way, he could gather evidence and plan his next steps wisely. With a heavy heart and a resolve born from desperation, he texted Jake back. "Find me a private investigator. I need to know if there's any truth to these rumors." As he pressed send, a sense of dread washed over him. He knew that with every tick of the clock, he was embarking on a journey that could change everything. The ship glided through the ocean, but in his heart, a storm was brewing, threatening to pull him under. Chapter 3. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with hues of orange and purple as Michael settled into the routine of ship life. He moved mechanically, performing his duties as an audiovisual technician while the rest of the crew reveled in the festivities of another successful cruise. But amid the laughter and music, Michael felt like an imposter, a ghost haunting the halls of the ship, unable to shake the heavy weight of his worries. After texting Jake, he wasted no time. He contacted a private investigator named Ryan, who came highly recommended. Over the phone, Michael recounted his concerns, his voice taut with anxiety. "I just need to know if there's anything going on between my wife and my brother-in-law," he said, trying to sound composed. Ryan assured him that he would handle the matter discreetly, vowing to gather evidence while keeping Michael's identity confidential. Once the call ended, the gravity of his decision hit him like a cold wave. He was now actively seeking proof of his wife's infidelity. The thought sent a shiver down his spine, igniting a storm of conflicting emotions. He felt like a man torn between two worlds, the unwavering love for his family and the paralyzing fear of losing everything he held dear. As the ship sailed into the night, he leaned against the railing, watching the waves crash against the hull. He couldn't help but picture Janice at home, surrounded by their children, possibly under the influence of Ben's persistent advances. A tight knot formed in his stomach as images of betrayal flashed in his mind. The once vibrant memories of their marriage dulled, replaced by doubts that clawed at his heart. Every encounter between Janice and Ben replayed in his mind like a haunting melody. The way Ben had always been so attentive during family gatherings, offering to help Janice with the kids, laughing a little too closely. He squeezed his eyes shut, desperately trying to dispel the thoughts. "No, Janice wouldn't do that to me," he whispered into the wind, searching for the anchor of his faith in their love. Yet, insecurity seeped into every corner of his heart. Would Janice miss him, or would she find comfort in Ben's presence? The contrast between his glamorous job and the mundane routine of family life felt like an insurmountable divide. Each night, he witnessed couples enjoying their vacations, hand in hand, sharing stolen kisses, while he felt the cold grip of uncertainty tightening around his heart. As the days passed, Michael found it increasingly challenging to focus on his work. He poured himself into his responsibilities, setting up lighting for shows and testing audio equipment, but his mind drifted back home like a ship adrift at sea. He'd glance at his phone, willing it to buzz with a message from Ryan, a sign that he was closer to the truth. When he finally received an update, it was late at night, and he was alone in his cabin, the sound of the ship's engines humming softly in the background. Michael stared at the message, a mix of relief and dread washing over him. He was taking action, yet the reality of the situation loomed large. The truth could shatter his world. He felt like a marionette, strings pulled taut, waiting for the inevitable cut that could send him crashing to the ground. The next morning, he forced himself out of bed, preparing for another day on the ship. As he dressed, he caught a glimpse of his reflection in the mirror. He was weary, a man caught between the life he cherished and the suspicion that threatened to unravel it all. He straightened his shoulders and took a deep breath, reminding himself of his purpose. "I'm doing this for my family," he whispered, a mantra to steady his resolve. He couldn't let doubt consume him. If he had to confront Janice, he would do so with the truth in hand, ready to protect the love they had built together. With each passing day, the investigation loomed over him like a dark cloud, and he could only hope that whatever Ryan uncovered would reveal the truth he desperately sought, whether it be fidelity or betrayal. Chapter 4. At home, sunlight streamed through the kitchen window, illuminating the chaos that was Janice's morning routine. The scent of pancakes filled the air as she deftly flipped them on the griddle, glancing at the clock with mild panic. James, Lucy, and Brody were already clamoring for attention, their voices a harmonious cacophony that echoed through the house. "Mom, I want syrup," James shouted, tugging at her apron. "Me too! Me too!" Lucy chimed in, her tiny hands grasping a colorful plate decorated with cartoon characters. "Brody, no," Janice called as her youngest, barely able to walk, reached for the dog's food bowl with his chubby fingers. With a quick stride, she scooped him up and set him in his high chair, offering him a piece of pancake instead. "See? Yummy!" She smiled, but her heart felt heavy. With Michael away for months at a time, Janice had grown accustomed to the daily grind of motherhood. Juggling 3 energetic kids was no easy task, and while she loved her children fiercely, the loneliness often crept in. She relished the moments of laughter and play, but found herself yearning for adult conversation and companionship. After breakfast, she herded the kids into their respective clothes, a task that felt like trying to wrangle a group of wild cats. It was a bit chaotic, but they made it to school just in time, with Janice waving goodbye as they bounded through the gates. The silence that settled over the house after they left was both a blessing and a curse. She would often find herself standing in the doorway, staring at the empty playground, the laughter of children now a distant echo. Once the initial rush of the morning subsided, Janice settled into her routine, tackling the never-ending list of chores. She vacuumed, dusted, and cleaned the kitchen, her mind wandering to her sister, Jelly, who lived next door. The 2 sisters had always shared an unbreakable bond, their friendship blossoming over the years. After tidying up, Janice decided to reach out to Jelly. "Hey, want to come over for coffee?" she texted, hoping for some much-needed sisterly support. Minutes later, Jelly appeared at her door, a bright smile lighting up her face. "I brought muffins," she exclaimed, stepping inside and giving Janice a quick hug. "Just what I needed, thanks." Janice beamed, her spirits lifting with her sister's presence. They settled into the cozy living room, sharing laughter and stories as they caught up on each other's lives. However, beneath the warmth of their connection, Janice couldn't shake the subtle tension that had begun to creep into their interactions. As the weeks passed, she noticed changes in Ben's demeanor. How he lingered a little too long at their house, his touch brushing against her arm while helping with chores. At first, she dismissed it as benign. After all, he was just being helpful. But the tension between them gradually shifted. She felt uncomfortable when he offered to fix things around the house, using his handyman skills as a cover to spend time with her. "I really appreciate you helping out, Ben, but you don't have to feel obligated," Janice said one afternoon as he repaired the leaky sink in her kitchen. He flashed her a grin, but she noticed the intensity in his gaze. "I enjoy it. Your family, Janice," he replied, his voice laced with something unspoken. As Jelly and Janice continued their conversations, the sisters began discussing their husbands. "Michael's been away a lot, huh?" Jelly said casually, but Janice felt a flicker of jealousy in her sister's tone. "Ben has been around more, helping you out." "Yeah, but he's just being a good brother-in-law," Janice replied, unsure if she was trying to convince Jelly or herself. "Just be careful, okay?" Jelly added, her brow furrowing with concern. "You know how some men can get when they're around a pretty woman alone for too long." Janice brushed it off with a laugh, but the seed of doubt planted itself in her mind. Was she reading too much into Ben's behavior? They had always been close, but now his actions felt tinged with an unsettling undertone. The schoolyard gossip soon found its way into their home, with kids teasing one another about Janice and Ben's growing friendship. Janice overheard snippets of conversations among the children. "Your mom is a slut," a classmate had yelled at James, who responded with tears and fury. Janice's heart ached for her children, caught in the crossfire of adult complexities. She couldn't let them feel the burden of her relationship with Ben, nor could she risk hurting Jelly. The pressure was mounting, and she felt like she was balancing on a tightrope, her every move scrutinized by the neighbors and her children. As the days went on, Janice made a silent vow to address Ben's behavior. She cherished her relationship with Jelly too much to let anything come between them. But when she attempted to set boundaries, Ben only intensified his flirtations, making her feel trapped in a situation that had spiraled out of her control. The pressure of maintaining appearances and shielding her children from the chaos weighed heavily on her shoulders. She could feel the world closing in around her, and all she wanted was her husband home, providing stability in the midst of the storm. Chapter 5. The warm afternoon sun streamed through the kitchen window as Janice prepared lunch for the kids. The house was a flurry of activity, toys scattered everywhere, the scent of grilled cheese wafted through the air, and the cheerful sounds of children's laughter echoed in the background. Just as she began to feel a sense of normalcy, the doorbell rang and her heart sank. She already knew who it was. "Hey, Janice, need any help?" Ben's voice boomed cheerfully as he stepped inside, a toolbox in hand and a casual grin on his face. Thanks, but I think I can manage," Janice replied, forcing a smile. Her instincts screamed at her to set boundaries, but the reality of their close-knit family ties kept her tethered to the situation. Ben shrugged, unfazed by her hesitance. "I can take a look at that leaky faucet you mentioned. You know I'm always happy to help." He stepped closer, invading her personal space with an easy confidence that sent a shiver down her spine. "Okay, if you insist." Janice finally relented, trying to focus on her task while Ben went to work. As he fiddled with the pipes beneath the sink, he made small talk, his casual demeanor giving way to more intimate comments. "You know, it's tough being away from family. I can only imagine how lonely it must be for you with Michael gone for so long." His voice lowered slightly, laden with sympathy that felt all too close for comfort. Janice nodded, trying to dismiss the unease stirring in her gut. "Yeah, it can be challenging, but I'm managing," she replied, carefully measuring her words. "I have the kids to keep me busy." Ben leaned against the counter, wiping his hands on a rag, the easy charm in his smile flickering slightly. "You're doing an amazing job, Janice. Seriously, Michael is lucky to have you." The compliment felt like both a gift and a burden, a reminder of her loyalty to Michael and the vows they had exchanged. But as Ben continued to linger, she couldn't ignore the way his gaze lingered a little too long on her face, his smile a touch too intimate. "You know, I've always admired how dedicated you are to the kids," Ben continued, his voice softening. "It's not easy being the sole parent when Michael is away. If you ever need help, I'm just next door." There it was again, the underlying current of his words. While she understood the offer was meant to be supportive, it felt tainted by an unsettling subtext. Thanks, Ben, but I really do appreciate the help from you and Jelly. I don't want to impose, she said, her voice tinged with an edge of caution. Impose? No way. We're family, he insisted, stepping closer again as he moved back to the sink, a hint of playful persistence in his tone. Janice felt the tension rising, and she quickly glanced away, trying to regain her composure. I really can handle it, she insisted, attempting to steer the conversation back to safer territory. But Ben was undeterred. You know, you're still the same Janice I remember from years ago, so strong and beautiful. You've really grown into an incredible woman. His words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Janice's heart raced, a mix of flattery and alarm coursing through her. She loved her sister too much to let her mind wander down this dangerous path. Ben was her brother-in-law, not a romantic interest. Ben, I really think we should keep this casual, she said, her voice steady but her stomach churning. You're my sister's husband, and I don't want to hurt her. He raised an eyebrow, and she could see the flicker of something in his eyes, perhaps disappointment or frustration. I'm not trying to hurt anyone, Janice. I just want to make sure you're okay. Can't a guy be concerned for his sister-in-law? Janice felt a pang of guilt at his words, a reminder of their close family ties. But the boundaries were blurring, and she felt it in the air between them. The days turned into weeks, and Ben's visits became increasingly frequent, always accompanied by a compliment or a lingering look that made her skin prickle. His help around the house turned into excuses to stay longer. She often caught him watching her when he thought she wasn't looking, his gaze both hungry and calculating. Meanwhile, Jelly's jealousy began to bubble beneath the surface, a silent tension forming in their interactions. Are you sure you're okay with Ben being around so much? Jelly asked one evening as they sat together in the backyard, the kids playing nearby. Of course. He's just helping me out with things around the house, Janice replied, trying to downplay it, but she could see the doubt clouding Jelly's eyes. Just be careful, okay? You know how people can talk. And I don't want you to get hurt, especially with everything going on. Everything is fine, Jelly, I promise, Janice insisted, but she could feel the cracks forming in her own confidence. As the days wore on, the pressure grew, and Janice felt like she was trapped in a tangled web of family loyalty and unwanted advances. She tried to distance herself from Ben, but he always found a way to insert himself into her life, fixing things around the house, helping with the kids, and always with that same flirtatious charm. The neighbors began to notice the growing closeness between Janice and Ben, their whispers drifting through the air like an unwelcome breeze. Janice could feel their eyes on her, and she could see the judgment in their gazes. What are they thinking? She wondered, the weight of their scrutiny pressing heavily on her heart. One afternoon, as she stood in her front yard, she caught sight of Ben working in his own yard, his shirt clinging to his frame as he mowed the grass. She swallowed hard, trying to ignore the pang of attraction that threatened to rise within her. This was not the path she wanted to walk. She felt the knot of anxiety tighten in her stomach. I can't let this happen, she thought, but with each passing day it felt like the line between right and wrong was becoming increasingly blurred. She resolved to confront Ben, to draw a firm line and remind him of the boundaries they had to respect as family. But each time she saw him, the words caught in her throat, replaced by the reality of their complicated family dynamic. In the chaos of her emotions, Janice felt herself spiraling, unsure of what to do next. She wanted to protect her family, but the weight of Ben's pursuit loomed larger with each passing day. Chapter 6. The morning sun spilled into the kitchen, where Janice stood at the counter pouring cereal into bowls for James, Lucy, and Brody. The chatter of her children filled the air, a sweet sound she cherished amid the growing turmoil surrounding her. But even the laughter felt strained, as if the weight of unspoken truths hung heavily in the room. Mom, why are the kids at school saying you're a slut? James blurted out, his small face scrunched in confusion and hurt. The question pierced through the morning haze, leaving Janice frozen in place, the spoon clattering against the bowl. James, where did you hear that? She asked, panic rising in her throat. They said it on the playground. They said Uncle Ben is your boyfriend, he replied, his voice trembling. Janice felt her heart drop. I'll talk to your teacher, okay? It's just a rumor, she said, trying to sound reassuring, but her own heart was racing with fear. Lucy, who was only 4, looked up at her mother with wide eyes. "Is Uncle Ben your boyfriend, Mommy?" she asked innocently, and Janice felt a wave of nausea wash over her. "No, sweetheart, of course not. Uncle Ben is just helping us, that's all. He loves Aunt Jelly." Janice replied, forcing a smile as she tried to shield her children from the harsh reality of the situation. But deep down, she could feel the cracks forming, the weight of the rumors pressing down on her family like a dark cloud. Why would they say that? Brody, still too young to understand fully, chimed in, his chubby cheeks puffed out as he mimicked his siblings' expressions. "Kids can be mean sometimes, they just don't understand," Janice said, trying to sound confident, but inside she was crumbling. The pressure of defending her honor while managing her children's emotional struggles felt suffocating. As they finished breakfast, Janice watched her kids get ready for school, her heart aching at the thought of them facing those cruel taunts alone. She felt helpless and overwhelmed, a mother torn between her duty to protect her children and her loyalty to her sister and family. At the school drop-off, Janice stood outside the gate, her stomach twisting with anxiety. She observed the other parents chatting, their eyes flicking toward her, whispers trailing in their wake. It was as if the rumors had seeped into the fabric of the community, staining her reputation and casting a shadow over her family. "Mom, can you walk me in?" James asked, glancing nervously at the other kids. The apprehension in his voice sent a pang of guilt through her heart. She had always wanted to be the strong, supportive mother, and now, as he faced ridicule, she felt utterly powerless. "Of course, sweetie," she replied, taking his small hand in hers. Together they walked through the bustling school entrance, but Janice couldn't shake the feeling of eyes on her, judging and whispering. As they approached James's classroom, she caught sight of a group of children huddled together, their laughter piercing the air. A wave of dread washed over her as she heard the unmistakable sound of mocking voices. "Look, it's James. Did your mom buy you new toys from Uncle Ben?" one boy sneered, laughter erupting from the group. Janice's heart sank as she witnessed the hurt on her son's face. She instinctively stepped forward, ready to defend him. "Hey, that's not nice," she called out, her voice trembling with anger. James looked up at her, his eyes wide with embarrassment. "Mom, please, I can handle it," he whispered, but she could see the tears brimming in his eyes. Janice knelt down, cupping his face in her hands. "You don't have to handle it alone, James. I'm here for you, always. Just remember, what they say isn't true," she assured him, brushing his cheek with her thumb. As she stood, the teacher approached, her expression sympathetic. "I'll speak to the class about rumors and bullying, Janice. It's unacceptable behavior," she said, but Janice felt a flicker of doubt. Would that really solve anything? After a tense goodbye, Janice watched as James slipped into the classroom, her heart heavy. She turned away, fighting back tears as she walked back to her car, the burden of the morning weighing on her. Once home, Janice tried to distract herself by tidying up, but the house felt unbearably quiet without the kids. Each sound echoed in the emptiness, reminding her of the turmoil brewing just beneath the surface. She thought about how Ben had crossed boundaries that should have remained sacred, and how the gossip had begun to poison her life. She picked up her phone, her fingers hovering over the screen as she considered calling Jelly. But the thought of confronting her sister about Ben, about how his behavior was affecting their family dynamic, felt daunting. What would Jelly think? How would she react? Instead, Janice opted for a walk, hoping fresh air might clear her mind. As she strolled through the neighborhood, the whispers of neighbors floated through the air, and she could feel the judgment heavy on her shoulders. Every time she saw someone, she felt their eyes on her, dissecting her every move. "Did you hear about Janice and Ben? What's going on over there?" The words twisted in her gut, and she felt a sense of isolation creep in. The community that had once felt like home now felt suffocating, as if she was trapped under a microscope. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Janice returned home, her heart weary and heavy with the weight of the day. She knew she had to talk to Michael soon. She had to be honest about what was happening. But fear gripped her, fear of losing him, of hurting him, of tearing their family apart. That night, as she lay in bed, The weight of everything settled on her chest like a lead blanket. The chaos of her life swirled around her, and she realized that she couldn't keep running from the truth. Something had to change before the rumors consumed them all. With a resolve she hadn't felt in weeks, Janice knew she needed to take a stand, not just for herself, but for her children. She would confront Ben, clear her name, and fight for her family, no matter the cost. Chapter 7. The next morning dawned with a heavy cloud hanging over Janice's heart, a lingering dread about facing the day ahead. She knew she needed to confront Ben about his behavior, but the thought of doing so filled her with anxiety. Instead, she resolved to lean on her sister, Jelly, hoping that together they could navigate the growing tensions surrounding them. Later that afternoon, Janice invited Jelly over for coffee, hoping to share her concerns and gain some clarity. As she prepared their favorite treat, chocolate chip cookies, the scent wafted through the house, momentarily lifting her spirits. She wanted this visit to be lighthearted, to escape the weight of the rumors and tension. But deep down, she knew that wouldn't be possible. When Jelly arrived, Janice greeted her with a warm hug, grateful for the comfort of family. "It's been too long since we've had a catch-up," Janice said, forcing a smile as she led Jelly to the kitchen. "Thanks for inviting me. I've missed our chats," Jelly replied, her expression softening as she took a seat at the table. As they settled in, Janice noticed a flicker of unease in Jelly's eyes. "How are things going with you and the kids?" Jelly asked, trying to sound casual, but the underlying tension was palpable. "Busy, you know how it is, just trying to keep everything together while Michael is away," Janice responded, her voice betraying a hint of the stress she felt. She offered Jelly a cookie, but her sister waved it off, her gaze distant. "Speaking of Michael, I heard some troubling things," Jelly said, finally voicing her concerns. "The neighbors are talking, Janice. They're saying that Ben has been over at your house a lot. Too much." Janice felt her heart race. "What do you mean?" she asked, attempting to remain calm. I've noticed things too," Jelly continued, her tone growing serious. "He's been helping you with chores, but it seems like it's gone beyond that. The way he looks at you sometimes." She paused, searching for the right words. "I'm worried, Janice. This isn't just brotherly help anymore. It feels inappropriate." Janice's stomach churned. "Jelly, you know I'd never do anything to hurt you or our families," she insisted, feeling defensive. "But it doesn't look that way from the outside. You have to understand how it looks to others." Jelly pressed, her voice tinged with frustration. "People are talking, and it's not fair to your kids or to me." Janice felt anger rising within her. "I'm not having an affair with Ben. He's just helping because I'm alone with the kids." "You know how chaotic things can get," she snapped, her frustration boiling over. "I can't believe you would think that about me." Jelly's eyes widened, hurt flashing across her face. "I'm just trying to look out for you. I thought you'd want to know what people are saying," she said, her voice softening. "I do want to know, but you have to trust me, Jelly. You're my sister. I need your support, not suspicion," Janice exclaimed, feeling tears prick at the corners of her eyes. The atmosphere grew thick with tension, and for a moment neither of them spoke. Janice could feel the rift forming between them, a painful divide that hadn't been there before. I don't want to lose you," Jelly finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You mean everything to me, but if Ben is crossing lines, it could ruin everything." Janice took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm inside her. "I love you, Jelly. I don't want to lose our bond either, but I need you to believe me when I say nothing is happening between Ben and me. I don't want to fight with you," she said, reaching out to grasp her sister's hand. Jelly hesitated, but eventually squeezed Janice's hand back, her expression softening. "Okay, I'll try to trust you," she said, though doubt lingered in her eyes. "Thank you," Janice replied, feeling a flicker of relief. "But can you talk to Ben? Let him know he's crossing a line? I think it would help clear the air." Jelly nodded slowly, the tension between them easing, but the doubt still hung heavy. "I will. Just, please be careful," she said, her concern evident. After their conversation, Janice felt a mix of gratitude and sadness. The bond with her sister felt strained, and she knew the rumors were damaging their relationship. That evening, as she prepared dinner, Janice couldn't shake the feeling of dread. She glanced at her phone, contemplating reaching out to Michael, but hesitation gripped her. What could she possibly say that wouldn't add to his worries? Later, while cleaning up after dinner, Janice heard a knock on the door. Her heart raced as she opened it to find Ben standing there with a bouquet of flowers, a charming smile plastered on his face. "Hey, just wanted to check in on you. I thought these might brighten your day," he said, handing her the flowers. Janice forced a smile, feeling a knot tighten in her stomach. "Thanks, Ben, but maybe you shouldn't be here so often," she replied, attempting to maintain her composure. "Why?" "I'm just being a good brother-in-law," he said, his tone light. But Janice noticed the intensity in his gaze. "I know, but with everything going on, it's complicated," she said, trying to be diplomatic. Ben stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Complicated or not, you know I'm here for you, right? I care about you, Janice." Her heart raced, and she took a step back, feeling the boundaries blur. "I appreciate that, but you need to respect my family," she said firmly, her voice trembling with emotion. "I know, but don't you ever feel a connection?" he asked, his voice dropping to a near whisper. Janice's mind raced as she grappled with his words, feeling cornered. "No, Ben. You're my brother-in-law. You're married to my sister," she replied, her heart pounding. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Right, but sometimes things change," he said, lingering in the doorway. Janice felt a wave of nausea wash over her. She needed to set boundaries to reinforce the walls around her family. "Please, Ben, I need you to step back," she said, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. As Ben's expression hardened, she felt a chill creep into the air. "Fine, but don't think I won't be here when you need me," he said before turning and walking away. Janice closed the door, her heart racing as the reality of the situation crashed down on her. She felt trapped in a web of rumors, jealousy, and unwanted advances. That night, as she lay in bed, Janice wrestled with her thoughts. She had always seen Ben as family, but now she felt like a stranger in her own life. She could sense the jealousy growing within Jelly, the pressure of the gossip bearing down on her, and the confusion of her children weighing heavily on her heart. In the silence of the night, she made a vow to herself. No matter how hard it became, she would fight to protect her family and her marriage. She had to find a way to confront the rumors head-on and reclaim her life before it spiraled out of control. Chapter 8. The sun rose the next morning, casting a warm glow over Janice's kitchen, but the light did little to lift the heaviness in her heart. Today, she knew, was the day she would confront Ben. The tension between them had reached a boiling point, and she could no longer tolerate his advances. She needed to set firm boundaries for the sake of her family and her own peace of mind. After dropping the kids off at school, Janice returned home, steeling herself for the conversation she had been dreading. She took a deep breath and picked up her phone, sending a quick text to Ben. "Can we talk?" She knew he'd likely drop by after lunch, as he usually did to check in on her. When Ben arrived, Janice felt a surge of adrenaline coursing through her veins. She opened the door, forcing a smile despite the turmoil inside. "Hey, Ben. Thanks for coming by," she said, trying to keep her tone light. "Of course, I brought you some lunch," he replied, holding up a takeout bag from their favorite local restaurant. "Thought you could use a break." "Thanks, but I'd like to talk first," Janice said, gesturing for him to come inside. She closed the door behind him, her heart pounding. As they settled at the kitchen table, Janice glanced at the takeout bag, feeling a pang of guilt for the confrontation she was about to initiate. She couldn't let his kindness distract her from the seriousness of the situation. "Ben, I appreciate everything you've done for me and the kids, but we need to talk about your behavior," she began, her voice steady but firm. Ben's expression shifted slightly, and he leaned forward, a hint of curiosity mixed with apprehension in his eyes. "What do you mean?" Janice took a deep breath, gathering her thoughts. "I've noticed that you've been acting differently lately, flirting, making comments that are crossing a line. I see you as family, and I need you to respect that." He sat back in his chair, crossing his arms defensively. "I don't think you understand how lonely you are, Janice. I'm just trying to help you feel better. You need someone who can be there for you." Janice felt anger bubbling beneath the surface. "You're my brother-in-law, Ben. I need you to understand that I'm not interested in anything more than that. I have a husband, and I love him. Love? Ben scoffed, his voice rising slightly. What do you know about love? Michael is away for months at a time. Who's there to support you? Who's picking up the pieces while he's gone? Janice's heart raced as she grappled with his words. I'm managing just fine, thank you very much. I have my sister and my kids. I don't need you trying to fill a void that doesn't exist. Ben's demeanor shifted, and he leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. But what if you could have something more? Something exciting? I'm offering you a chance to feel alive again, Janice. Just think about it. The intensity of his gaze made Janice shiver. What are you saying? You want me to have an affair with you? She asked, incredulous. You're married to my sister. Ben's expression hardened, his voice low and firm. I'm saying that you should consider it. You're unhappy, and we both know it. I can make you feel things you've been missing. It doesn't have to be forever, just something for now. Janice felt her stomach twist at his suggestion. No, Ben, you don't get to decide what I need. This isn't about my happiness. This is about you trying to manipulate me because you think I'm vulnerable. She stood up, the anger coursing through her, fueling her resolve. You're being dramatic, Ben replied, his frustration evident. I'm trying to help you, and you're shutting me out. I don't want your help if it comes with conditions. I need you to leave, Janice said, her voice shaking with emotion. This has to stop now. Ben stood up, his expression shifting to one of anger. You think you can just push me away like that? I'm not going anywhere, Janice. You can pretend all you want, but deep down, you know I'm right. You want this too. No, I don't, Janice yelled, feeling the tears prick at her eyes. You need to respect my boundaries. I love my husband, and I will not betray him. Ben stepped closer, his eyes narrowing. You're making a mistake, Janice. You're letting your pride get in the way of what could be a great opportunity for both of us. At that moment, Janice felt a surge of clarity and determination. This isn't an opportunity. It's a betrayal. I won't let you manipulate me, and I won't let you come between my family. I'm asking you nicely to leave before I call Jelly. Ben's expression darkened, and for a moment, Janice thought she saw a flicker of something sinister in his eyes. Fine, but don't say I didn't warn you, he said coldly, turning on his heel and storming out the door. As she watched him leave, Janice felt a mix of relief and fear. She had stood up for herself, but the weight of the confrontation hung heavily in the air. She closed the door behind him, her heart racing, and leaned against it for support. In the aftermath of their confrontation, Janice realized the depth of the situation she was facing. It was no longer just about rumors. It was about protecting her family, her marriage, and her own sense of self-worth. As the silence enveloped her, she felt a determination rising within. She wouldn't let Ben's advances destroy the life she had built with Michael. She needed to speak to him and share everything, no matter how difficult the conversation might be. With a sense of urgency, Janice grabbed her phone and dialed Michael's number, her heart pounding as she waited for him to answer. This time, she would be honest. This time, she would fight for her love. Chapter 9. After Ben stormed out, Janice sank into the nearest chair, her head spinning. The confrontation had been intense, and while she felt a sense of relief in standing her ground, a heavy weight of guilt settled in her chest. She replayed the moments of their discussion, her heart racing at the thought of what might have happened had she not confronted him. As she looked around the room, cluttered with toys and remnants of family life, her thoughts drifted to Jelly. The bond between them had always been unbreakable, founded on years of shared memories and mutual support. Now, the thought of involving her sister in this mess filled Janice with dread. She couldn't bear the idea of betraying Jelly's trust or the potential fallout from Ben's behavior. She had to protect her sister from the truth of Ben's pursuit, even as she grappled with the ramifications for her own marriage. Feeling overwhelmed, Janice reached for her phone, her fingers trembling as she dialed Michael's number. It was a call she had been putting off, a call she feared might lead to misunderstandings. But now, more than ever, she needed his support and guidance. After several rings, Michael answered, his voice warm and familiar, cutting through her anxiety. "Hey, babe, how's everything back home?" Hearing his voice made her heart ache. "Michael, I really need to talk to you. Can you come home?" There was a brief pause on the line, and Janice could almost hear the gears turning in his mind. Is everything okay? Is it the kids? It's not just the kids. It's complicated, she said, her voice faltering. There's been some drama, and I need you here. I don't know how to explain everything over the phone. Drama? What kind of drama? He asked, concern threading through his voice. Janice hesitated, the weight of her words pressing down on her. She wanted to tell him about Ben's advances, but she feared how it would affect him, how it would alter their life together. It's about me and the kids and Ben. I just think it would be better if we talked in person. Ben? Your brother-in-law? Michael sounded confused. What's he got to do with anything? I know it sounds strange, but I just need you here. Please, she pleaded, her voice thick with emotion. Okay. I'll talk to my supervisor and see if I can get a flight home, Michael replied, his tone shifting to that of a husband ready to support his wife. I'll be there as soon as I can. Just hang in there, all right? Thank you, Janice breathed, relief flooding through her. I'll be waiting. After they hung up, Janice felt a sense of impending dread wash over her. She had made the call, but now she was left alone with her thoughts. Thoughts that spiraled from guilt about Ben to worry over Michael's reaction. How could she explain the situation without causing unnecessary hurt? Would Michael believe her? Would he understand that she had been trying to push Ben away? The more she thought about it, the more tangled her emotions became. She had been loyal to Michael, but Ben's relentless pursuit made her question everything. Was she truly innocent in this situation? Or had her friendship with Ben led to this tangled mess? Janice shook her head, trying to dispel the confusion. She had not asked for this. She had not sought out Ben's attention, nor did she reciprocate his feelings. All she wanted was a peaceful life with her husband and children. Yet the worry gnawed at her, leaving her feeling exposed and vulnerable. With a deep breath, Janice stood up and began to tidy the house, trying to distract herself from her racing thoughts. She picked up toys and put them away, wiped down surfaces, and tried to create a sense of order amidst the chaos in her mind. As she worked, she thought about her kids. James, Lucy, and Brody were innocent in all this, yet they were entangled in the drama unfolding around them. She could already see how the rumors affected them, and she couldn't bear to think of their fragile hearts being further broken. In her heart, Janice knew that she had to protect them at all costs. This was about more than just her marriage. It was about their family's stability and happiness. She had to be strong for them, just as she had always been. But as she glanced at the clock, counting down the hours until Michael would arrive, doubt crept back in. Would she be able to face him with the truth? Would he understand, or would he feel betrayed? Time ticked away slowly, and the uncertainty began to weigh heavily on her shoulders. Janice sank back into the chair, her heart pounding as she closed her eyes, praying for clarity and courage. She needed to be honest with Michael, to show him the strength of their love, even in the face of adversity. But with every passing moment, the guilt of the situation and the confusion of her emotions threatened to overwhelm her. She was ready to fight for her marriage, but could she face the truth when it finally came? Chapter 10. The sun dipped low on the horizon, casting a warm golden hue over the ocean, as Michael stood on the deck of the cruise ship, staring out at the vast expanse of water. The serenity of the moment felt starkly at odds with the turmoil raging inside him. He could barely focus on the work at hand, the sounds of machinery and chatter around him fading into the background. His mind was fixated on Janice and the rumors that had shaken the foundation of their marriage. The phone buzzed in his pocket, pulling him from his thoughts. It was a text from the private investigator he had hired, and his heart raced as he opened it. The messages came in rapid succession, each one more damning than the last. Update on Janice. Attached are photos from yesterday. Janice and Ben are seen at the park. He is handing her a drink. It looks friendly, but I can't say for certain. Michael's heart sank as he clicked on the images. In one, Janice stood with a warm smile, Ben's hand lightly brushing against her shoulder. The next photo showed Ben leaning in closer, whispering something into her ear. Though they appeared innocent enough, Michael's mind twisted them into something darker. How could she be so comfortable with him? The way they were interacting felt too intimate for mere friendship. The next message was worse. At the school pickup yesterday, Ben was seen hugging Janice. I managed to get a photo, but it's not clear if there was any romantic intent. Michael's fists clenched around his phone, the anger bubbling to the surface. He remembered the countless conversations he and Janice had shared about trust and loyalty. Had all those promises been mere words? Had he been naive to think that their love could withstand the test of time and distance? The investigator continued, I have more photos of Ben mowing your lawn and delivering flowers. I'll send those over shortly. The word flowers hit him like a punch to the gut. He could picture them on their doorstep, vibrant blooms that Janice would have smiled at, a gesture that should have been innocent. But now, every beautiful detail felt like a betrayal. Michael's breath quickened as rage coursed through him. He couldn't believe Janice could do this to him, to their family. With each update, doubt crept in like a thief, stealing the trust he had in her. What if the rumors were true? What if she had been lying to him all along? He could almost hear the whispers of the neighbors, the judgment in their eyes. The thought of Janice, who had always been his rock, becoming something he could no longer recognize, filled him with a mix of anger and heartbreak. The ship's crew moved around him, but Michael felt entirely alone. He had trusted Janice implicitly, allowing her the space to thrive while he worked long hours on the ship. He had thought he was doing the right thing by providing for their family. Now, that trust was crumbling, and all he could think about was how he had left her vulnerable to temptation. He returned to his cabin, his mind racing with what he would say to her, how he would present the evidence he had gathered. But beneath it all, there was a small part of him that held on to hope. Maybe there was a logical explanation for everything. Maybe he could still save their marriage. With a deep breath, Michael packed his things, the weight of his decision settling heavily within him. As the ship sailed toward home, he could only pray that when he returned, he would find the love they had once shared still intact, waiting to be rekindled amidst the chaos. Chapter 11. The familiar sights of home loomed ahead as Michael's taxi pulled into the quiet neighborhood where Janice and the kids lived. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a warm, golden light over the rows of houses, each one brimming with the laughter of children playing outside. It was a picturesque scene, one that should have filled him with joy, yet his heart felt heavy. As he stepped out of the taxi, Michael took a moment to gather his thoughts. The last few weeks had been a whirlwind of emotions, and the thought of confronting Janice filled him with trepidation. He wanted to believe her, to trust her, but the evidence he had seen loomed large in his mind. He walked up the driveway, noting the cheerful decorations in the front yard. An oversized welcome home sign fluttered in the gentle breeze, hand-painted by the kids. The sight should have warmed his heart, but all he felt was a growing pit of anxiety in his stomach. As he stepped inside, the familiar sense of home engulfed him. Freshly baked cookies, a hint of lemon from Janice's favorite cleaner, and the faint sound of the kids' laughter echoing from the living room. His heart softened for a moment at the thought of his family. "Daddy!" James was the first to spot him, bursting into the room with a wide grin, followed closely by Lucy and Brody, who waddled in behind him. They all rushed to him, their little arms wrapping around his legs in a chaotic but heartfelt embrace. "Hey, guys," Michael said, kneeling down to return their hugs, his heart swelling with affection despite the heaviness that lingered in his chest. "I missed you so much." The kids chattered excitedly, bombarding him with stories of their days and how they had been counting down the weeks until he returned. But amidst their joy, Michael could feel the tension in the air, the unspoken words hanging heavily between him and Janice. Finally, he straightened up and turned to find Janice standing in the doorway, her expression a mix of relief and apprehension. She wore an apron smeared with flour, and her hair was pulled back in a loose bun. She looked beautiful, yet worn, as if the weight of the past few months had taken its toll on her. "Michael," she breathed, stepping forward with hesitant steps. "Hey," he replied softly, a flood of emotions washing over him as he took her in. Despite the chaos of their situation, the love he felt for her was undeniable. They stood facing each other, the children bustling around them, oblivious to the tension brewing in the room. Janice's eyes searched his, and for a moment it felt like time stood still. "I'm so glad you're home," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I was really worried about you." "Yeah," he replied, swallowing hard. "I needed to come back, I just wish it was under better circumstances." The weight of the unsaid words settled between them like a thick fog, and Janice nodded, her expression shifting to one of determination. "I know we need to talk. I've been dreading this conversation, but I want to be honest with you." "Let's talk," he said, feeling the knot in his stomach tighten even more. "But not in front of the kids. I don't want them to worry." "Agreed," Janice replied, her eyes flickering with understanding. "Why don't we go into the kitchen? I'll grab us some drinks." As they moved toward the kitchen, the children continued playing in the living room, laughter ringing out like a bittersweet reminder of their innocence. Michael's heart ached at the thought of them being caught in the middle of an adult conflict. In the kitchen, Janice filled 2 glasses with iced tea, her hands shaking slightly as she placed them on the table. Michael sat down, his heart pounding in his chest. The air was thick with tension, and he could feel the weight of everything that had been left unsaid pressing down on them. "Michael," Janice began, her voice trembling slightly, "I've missed you more than I can say, but there's so much going on that I need to explain." Michael nodded, his pulse racing. "I need you to be honest with me, Janice. I found some things that made me question everything." The color drained from her face, and she took a deep breath. "I know, and I want to explain, but please believe me when I say that nothing has happened between me and Ben." As the words hung in the air, Michael's heart sank. The moment of truth had arrived, and he braced himself for the conversation that could change everything. Chapter 12. The tension in the kitchen was palpable as Michael and Janice faced each other, the air thick with unspoken fears and accusations. Michael's heart raced, and he struggled to find the right words, knowing this conversation could redefine their entire relationship. "Janice," he began, his voice steady but strained, "I've seen the pictures. The ones of you and Ben. It looks bad." He felt the heat rise in his chest as he fought against the flood of emotions threatening to overwhelm him. "How could you put yourself in those situations?" Janice's eyes widened in shock, her hands instinctively clenching around the edge of the table. "Michael, please, you have to understand. It's not what you think." "Then what is it?" he pressed, his frustration bubbling to the surface. "Why is he mowing our lawn? Why did I find love notes in our mailbox? It's not just innocent help." Janice's expression shifted from shock to hurt. "I can't believe you would think that of me. I asked Ben for help because I had no choice. You've been gone for months, and I'm left here managing everything on my own. He's family, and I thought I could trust him." "Trust him?" Michael's voice rose, a mixture of anger and disbelief flooding his veins. "He's crossing boundaries, Janice. This isn't just about chores anymore. This is about respect and loyalty." Tears filled Janice's eyes as she tried to hold her composure. "I haven't crossed any lines. I swear to you, Michael. I love you and our family. I would never betray you." "But it looks like you have," he shouted, unable to keep his emotions at bay. The image of Ben's face and the rumors swirling in the neighborhood burned in his mind. "How can I trust you when everything points to betrayal?" Janice took a shaky breath, her voice trembling. "You don't know what it's been like for me here. I'm alone, Michael. I have 3 kids to take care of, and yes, sometimes I need help. But I have never wanted anything more than to be with you and our family. I would never put myself in a position to hurt you." "Then why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you call me and tell me what was happening?" he demanded, his heart aching at the thought of her suffering alone. "I didn't want to worry you," she replied, her voice barely a whisper. "I thought I could handle it. I thought I could keep everything under control until you got home." Michael ran a hand through his hair, frustration boiling within him. "This isn't just about me being gone. It's about trust. You should have come to me, and now I feel like I don't even know who you are." Janice stepped closer, her hands reaching out toward him. "Please, just listen. I know Ben has been acting weird, but I swear I have not done anything with him. I see him as a brother, nothing more. He's been trying to help, but it's not what you think. I love you, Michael. I would never betray our marriage." As she spoke, tears streamed down her cheeks, and Michael felt a pang of guilt for the pain he was causing her. The memories of their life together flooded his mind. The laughter, the joy, the love that had once been so strong between them. But doubt still clawed at him, refusing to let go. "Then what about the love notes?" he asked, his voice quieter, more vulnerable. "What are those about?" Janice's face crumpled in despair. "I found them too, but I didn't keep them. I thought they were just Ben's way of trying to get my attention. I told him to stop, and he promised he would, but I didn't want to upset Jelly or make things awkward between our families. I thought if I just ignored it, it would go away." Michael studied her, searching her eyes for any hint of deceit, but all he saw was desperation and pain. "So you just let it happen? You let him pursue you?" "I thought I could handle it," she cried, her voice breaking. "I was scared, Michael. I didn't want to lose my sister or my family. I thought it was a phase, something he would get over, but now it's spiraled out of control, and I can't take it anymore. That's why I called you." The admission hung heavy in the air, and Michael felt his resolve begin to waver. He wanted to believe her, wanted to trust that she was innocent, but the pictures and rumors loomed over them like dark clouds, casting shadows on their love. "Janice," he said, his voice softer now, "if you want me to believe you, you need to help me understand. I need to know why this happened. Why did you let it go this far?" "I thought I could make things easier, that I could manage it on my own," she replied, her voice filled with sorrow. "But I realize now that I was wrong. I should have come to you sooner, no matter how difficult it was. I should have trusted you with my fears." As Janice's words sank in, Michael felt the weight of her honesty begin to break through his anger. He remembered the love they had shared, the life they had built together. He could see the fear and regret in her eyes, and despite the hurt, a part of him wanted to reach out and comfort her. "I need time to process all of this," he finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I want to believe you, but I need to see that you understand how serious this is." "I do," Janice said, her voice trembling with emotion. "I will do whatever it takes to prove my love for you and to rebuild our trust. I don't want to lose you." Michael took a deep breath, feeling the tears welling in his own eyes as he gazed into hers. "I love you too, Janice. I just don't know how to get past this." As they stood together, the emotional chasm between them felt both terrifying and uncertain. But in that moment, they both understood that their journey was far from over. They had to face the truth, confront their fears, and decide if their love was strong enough to weather the storm. Chapter 13. Michael turned his gaze away, staring out the window at the kids playing in the yard, their laughter a stark contrast to the turmoil inside. "Maybe I should have come home sooner," he murmured, guilt creeping in. "Maybe if I had been there, things wouldn't have gotten this far." "No, it's not your fault," she insisted, shaking her head. "You're working hard to provide for us. I should have been stronger. I should have set boundaries with Ben. I should have told you everything." Michael ran a hand through his hair, the weight of her words pressing down on him. "I want to believe you, Janice, but I also can't ignore what I've seen. I feel like I'm standing on shaky ground, and every step I take could lead me to more pain." Janice stepped closer, desperation etched across her face. "Please, Michael, let me show you. Let me prove to you that I'm not the person those pictures make me out to be. I love you and our family more than anything in this world. I would never jeopardize that." He looked deep into her eyes, searching for the truth. "How do I know that this won't happen again? That Ben won't try something else?" "I will keep him at a distance. I'll talk to Jelly. I'll be open and honest about everything. You have my word," she promised, her voice steady. "You have to trust me, just like I'm trying to trust you." Michael took a deep breath, feeling the tension between them slowly begin to dissolve, if only slightly. "Trust is hard to rebuild once it's broken, Janice. I don't want to live in fear that you might betray me. I don't want our marriage to be built on doubt." "I know," she said softly, "but we can work through this together. Let's confront this head on. I'll do whatever it takes to make things right." He nodded slowly, processing her words. "Okay, but I need time, and I need you to be patient with me. This isn't going to be easy." "I can do that," Janice said, relief flooding her voice. "We'll take it one step at a time." As they stood together, the air still thick with uncertainty, Michael couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the brink of a pivotal moment in their relationship. Would they emerge stronger from this trial, or would it tear them apart? Only time would tell, but for now, they had each other, and perhaps that was enough to begin the healing process. Chapter 14. The night had settled into a comfortable quiet, with the hum of crickets in the distance and the soft flicker of the porch light casting shadows across the yard. Michael and Janice sat together on the porch swing, the cool evening air brushing against their skin. For the first time in weeks, the silence between them felt less like a barrier and more like an unspoken understanding. The past few days had been exhausting, emotionally, mentally, and physically. The accusations, the tension with Ben, and the relentless gossip had pushed them both to the brink. But tonight, something felt different. The weight wasn't entirely gone, but it was lighter. They were together, and that was a start. Michael leaned back on the swing, his hands resting on his knees as he exhaled slowly. "It's been a rough few months, hasn't it?" Janice nodded, her eyes fixed on the horizon. "It has. I feel like everything's fallen apart." She sighed, her voice quieter now. "But I'm glad you're home. I missed you." Michael turned to look at her, the vulnerability in her voice catching him off guard. It had been so long since they'd allowed themselves to speak openly, without the weight of suspicion or anger clouding their words. "I missed you too," he said, his voice soft but earnest. He reached for her hand, and after a moment of hesitation, Janice let her fingers intertwine with his. For a while, they just sat there, hands joined, not needing to fill the silence with words. It was a strange kind of peace, born from shared pain, but it felt like the first step toward healing. Janice broke the silence first. "Do you remember when we first met?" She asked, her lips curving into a small, nostalgic smile. Michael chuckled, the sound low and familiar. "Of course I do. You were the quiet girl in the back of the class, always scribbling notes. And you were the guy who thought he was too cool for school," she teased lightly, a warmth creeping into her voice. "Hey, I was not that bad," Michael protested with a laugh. "Okay, maybe I was a little arrogant. But you," he paused, turning to look at her, his expression softening. "You were the only one who saw through all of that. You called me out on my nonsense." "I guess I've always been good at that," she said, her smile fading into something more serious. "I used to feel like I could read you better than anyone." Michael nodded, his expression thoughtful. "You did. You still do, I think. We just stopped talking for a while." "Life got in the way," Janice said quietly, her thumb tracing small circles over his knuckles. "The kids, work, your contracts, and everything else." Michael swallowed, the guilt from the past few months still fresh in his mind. "I should have been here more. I shouldn't have let things get so bad before I realized what was happening." Janice shook her head, squeezing his hand. "It's not all on you. I could have been more open about how hard things were getting. I should have told you about Ben sooner. I didn't want to worry you while you were away, but I think I just made things worse." They sat in silence again, the weight of their unspoken regrets hanging between them. But it was a different kind of silence this time, one filled with understanding, not avoidance. Michael finally spoke, his voice hesitant but sincere. "I don't know what I would have done if you had actually." He trailed off, not wanting to say the words out loud. Janice looked at him, her eyes soft but steady. "Michael, I never cheated on you. Not once. I know things looked bad, and I'm sorry for not being more careful. But I love you. You're the only one I want to be with." Hearing those words felt like a balm to the wound that had been festering in Michael's heart. He had been so consumed by jealousy and doubt that he had forgotten how deeply they were connected, how much they had built together. "I believe you," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I was so scared of losing you that I didn't stop to think. I let the rumors get to me, and I should have trusted you more." Janice smiled faintly, her eyes welling with unshed tears. "It's okay. We've both made mistakes, but we're here now, and we're talking." Michael nodded, feeling a sense of relief wash over him. It wasn't an easy conversation, but it was necessary, and as difficult as the past months had been, sitting here, holding her hand, he realized that they were still in this together. "I miss this," he said after a while. "Just talking. Being with you." "Me too," Janice replied softly. "We used to stay up all night talking when we first started dating. Remember that one time we sat in your car for hours just laughing about the stupidest things?" Michael grinned. Yeah, and then we got yelled at by that cop because we were parked outside a random house at 2 a.m. They both laughed, the sound breaking through the tension that had weighed them down for so long. It felt good to remember the simpler times when their love was new and uncomplicated. As the night deepened, they continued to share memories, some happy, some bittersweet. But it all brought them closer. They talked about their first road trip, the night Michael proposed, the birth of their kids. Each story felt like a piece of their shared history, reminding them of how far they'd come and why they had fought so hard to stay together. By the time they finally headed inside, the air between them felt lighter, their bond renewed. It wasn't a perfect resolution. There were still challenges to face, apologies to be made, and trust to rebuild, but they had taken the first step. As they climbed into bed, Janice leaned her head on Michael's shoulder, and he wrapped his arm around her. They lay there in comfortable silence, their breathing in sync, hearts slowly mending. For the first time in a long time, Janice closed her eyes with a sense of peace, knowing that they could get through this together. Chapter 15. I'm going to talk to Ben, Michael said suddenly, his voice thick with resolve. Janice froze, her back turned to him. She knew this moment would come, but the thought of Michael and Ben confronting each other filled her with dread. Are you sure that's a good idea? She asked softly, not turning around. He needs to know this stops now, Michael replied, his voice firm. The rumors are tearing our family apart. He's the one at the center of all this, and I need to hear it from him. Janice slowly turned to face him, worry etched across her face. Just be careful. I don't know how Ben will react. Michael stood, nodding at her. I'll handle it. Without another word, he grabbed his jacket and headed out the door. The tension in the air was thick, and Janice couldn't shake the sense of dread creeping up her spine. Michael drove in silence, his thoughts swirling. The private investigator's photos, the rumors at school, and Janice's distress. All of it had brought him to this point. He pulled up to Ben's house, the familiar 2-story building where his brother-in-law lived with Jelly. His pulse quickened as he parked the car, took a deep breath, and marched up the driveway. The door swung open before Michael even knocked. Ben stood there, a forced smile on his face. Michael, hey man, what's going on? Ben greeted him as if nothing had happened, as if everything were normal. Michael's jaw clenched. We need to talk. Ben's smile faltered slightly, but he stepped aside, gesturing for Michael to come in. Michael walked past him, the tension between them palpable. They stood in the living room, both men facing each other. What's this about? Ben asked, his voice steady but with a hint of nervousness. Michael didn't waste any time. I've heard the rumors, Ben, about you and Janice, and I've seen the photos. Ben's eyes widened slightly, but he quickly composed himself. Photos? What photos? Michael's fists tightened at his sides. The ones that make it look like there's something going on between you and my wife. Something more than brotherly help. Ben let out a forced laugh. Come on, man, you can't be serious. Janice is like a sister to me. You know that. Michael stepped closer, his voice rising. Don't play games with me, Ben. The rumors are spreading. My kids are being bullied. People are talking behind our backs, and I've seen enough to know this isn't just some innocent misunderstanding. Ben's expression darkened. I don't know what you think you've seen, but I swear nothing's happening between me and Janice. This is all some ridiculous gossip. Michael's anger flared. Then why are you always at my house? Why are there pictures of you and Janice together when I'm not around? Why are people saying you've been making advances on her? Ben's face flushed with irritation. I help her out because she's family, Michael. Jelly's my wife and Janice is her sister. That's it. People will say whatever they want, but there's no truth to any of it. Michael's patience snapped. Cut the crap, Ben. You've been crossing lines and you know it. I've seen how you look at her, how you act around her. Don't pretend like it's all innocent. For a moment, Ben's bravado faltered. He shifted uncomfortably, his gaze dropping to the floor. Look, maybe I've gotten a little too close, okay? But that doesn't mean I've done anything wrong. Janice has never given me the time of day like that. Michael took a step forward, his voice low and dangerous. Too close? You've put my marriage at risk. My family is falling apart because of you. Ben's face hardened and he shot Michael a defiant look. I haven't done anything, man. You're letting this stupid gossip mess with your head. Michael couldn't believe what he was hearing. The denial, the lack of remorse, it pushed him past the breaking point. I trusted you, Ben. I trusted you to look out for my family, and instead you've been causing all of this. Do you even realize the damage you've done? Ben's eyes flashed with anger. The damage I've done? You're acting like I'm the one spreading these rumors. I haven't done anything wrong, Michael. Maybe you should look at your own marriage before you come accusing me of something that doesn't exist. Michael's fist clenched, and for a moment he considered hitting him. But he stopped himself. That wouldn't solve anything. Instead, he leaned in, his voice cold and calm. Stay away from my family, Ben. Don't come near Janice. Don't come near my kids. This ends now. Ben stared at him, his expression unreadable, but Michael could feel the tension radiating off him. I mean it. Michael warned, if I hear one more thing, if I see one more thing, you're going to regret it. With that, Michael turned on his heel and stormed out of the house, slamming the door behind him. His heart was pounding, his anger barely contained as he marched back to his car. As he drove away, the confrontation replayed in his mind. Ben's denials had done nothing to ease his suspicions, and while he didn't have definitive proof of an affair, the lines had clearly been blurred. The tension was far from over. Back at home, Janice paced nervously in the living room, waiting for Michael's return. When the front door opened and he walked in, his expression dark and tense, she knew things had escalated. "How did it go?" she asked cautiously. Michael shook his head, his anger still simmering just beneath the surface. He denied everything, said it's all rumors and that nothing's happening. Janice bit her lip, her anxiety mounting. "Do you believe him?" Michael hesitated for a moment, his eyes searching hers. "I don't know, but I told him to stay away from you. From us." A heavy silence hung between them, the weight of the confrontation still fresh. Janice reached for Michael's hand, squeezing it tightly. "We'll get through this," she whispered, hoping it was true. Michael nodded, though doubt still lingered in his mind. "We have to." As they stood together in the quiet of their living room, both knew that this was far from over. The rumors, the suspicions, the strain on their relationship, they still had a long way to go. But for now, they had each other, and that would have to be enough. Chapter 16. The days following Michael's confrontation with Ben were tense and fraught with emotional landmines. The confrontation had sparked something that couldn't be easily contained, and now the consequences were beginning to unravel every fragile thread that had held Janice's and Michael's world together. Janice stood at the kitchen counter, her hands trembling as she stared blankly at the sink. The house felt too quiet, the silence almost suffocating. The kids were upstairs, temporarily oblivious to the storm swirling around them. But they had sensed the change, too. The air in the house was thick with tension. Michael hadn't said much since that night. He'd come home angry, his words brief and to the point, and though they slept in the same bed, there was a cold distance between them that neither of them knew how to bridge. It was as if Ben's presence, even in absence, lingered between them like a shadow they couldn't escape. Janice glanced at her phone, hesitant to look at the dozens of missed messages from Jelly. Her sister had called repeatedly, her anger palpable in every voicemail and text. The confrontation between Michael and Ben had hit harder than anyone had anticipated. Finally, the phone buzzed again, and Janice sighed, picking it up reluctantly. It was Jelly. "Hello?" Janice answered, her voice barely above a whisper. Jelly wasted no time, her voice sharp on the other end. "What the hell is going on, Janice? Ben told me everything. Michael came over here accusing him of trying to steal you from him." Janice closed her eyes, her chest tightening. "It's not like that, Jelly. I don't know what Ben told you, but things have gotten really complicated. People are talking, and Michael saw some things that made him—" Jelly cut her off. "Complicated? Do you even hear yourself? You're letting these rumors ruin everything. Ben has been nothing but helpful while Michael's been away, and now you're going to let this nonsense destroy our family?" "My marriage—" Janice gripped the edge of the counter, her knuckles turning white. "Jelly, it's not just rumors. Ben has been acting different. I told Michael about it. I even tried to talk to Ben myself, but he—" "What, Janice?" "He what?" "You've always been so dramatic. Ben's never done anything wrong, and now you're trying to blame him because people are talking behind your back? Maybe you should look at your own actions before accusing my husband of anything." The words stung. Deep down, Janice had feared this moment would come, that Jelly wouldn't believe her, that her sister would side with Ben. But hearing it so bluntly left her speechless, her mind spinning. Jelly's voice softened, but there was still an edge of frustration. "Janice, we're sisters. We're supposed to look out for each other. But right now, I feel like you're pushing me away. You're letting these stupid rumors come between us, and it's hurting everyone." Tears welled in Janice's eyes as she tried to keep her composure. "I never wanted this to happen, Jelly. I never wanted to come between you and Ben. Then stop it," Jelly said firmly. "Stop this before it destroys everything. Don't let these lies ruin what we have." With that, Jelly hung up, leaving Janice standing alone in the kitchen, the weight of her words sinking deeper into her heart. She had hoped, even prayed, that her sister would understand, that she could make Jelly see the truth. But now, it felt like everything was slipping further out of her control. Michael entered the room silently, his presence looming as he stood by the doorway. Janice turned to face him, her voice barely a whisper. "Jelly doesn't believe me. She thinks I'm making all of this up." Michael's face was unreadable, his eyes clouded with a mixture of anger, hurt, and something else, something she couldn't quite place. He crossed the room slowly, leaning against the counter beside her, staring out the window. "I didn't expect her to," he finally said, his voice flat. Janice blinked, surprised. "What do you mean?" Michael's jaw clenched, his hands gripping the counter. "Jelly has always believed what she wants to believe, and right now it's easier for her to believe that you're the problem, that it's all just rumors, than to accept the possibility that her husband crossed a line." Janice bit her lip, her heart aching at the distance between her and her sister. "I never wanted this, Michael. I didn't want to come between Jelly and Ben. I didn't know what else to do." Michael sighed heavily, his shoulders slumping. "None of this is your fault, Janice, but it doesn't make it any easier, does it?" The silence between them stretched on, thick with unresolved emotions. Janice could feel the trust between them hanging by a thread. Though Michael had stood by her, there was a lingering tension, an unspoken question of whether he truly believed her or if the seeds of doubt had taken root. "I don't know what to do," Janice admitted quietly, her voice cracking. Michael turned to look at her, his eyes softening. "Neither do I," he confessed. "I want to believe you. I do. But after everything, I don't know what to believe anymore." Janice's heart sank. "Do you think I'm lying?" Michael shook his head, running a hand through his hair. "No, but I think this whole situation has made it impossible to know what's true and what's not." His words hung heavy in the air, and for the first time, Janice felt the full weight of the distance that had grown between them. It wasn't just the rumors or Ben's advances or the neighborhood gossip. It was the cracks in their relationship, the trust that had been eroded over time. "I want to fix this, Michael," Janice whispered. "I want us to be okay." Michael nodded, his gaze soft but distant. "I do too, but it's going to take time, Janice. Time to rebuild what's been broken." Janice reached for his hand, squeezing it gently, her heart aching for the man she loved. "Then we'll take that time. Together." For a moment, Michael didn't respond. Then, slowly, he squeezed her hand back, a small gesture of hope amidst the chaos that had engulfed them. But Janice knew that this was only the beginning of the fallout. Jelly's trust had been shattered, and the rumors continued to swirl. Their family was on the brink of collapse, and only time would tell if they could weather the storm together. Chapter 17. The early morning sun filtered through the kitchen blinds as Janice sat at the table, her hands wrapped around a mug of coffee that had long since gone cold. She hadn't slept much the night before. The argument with Jelly, the tension with Michael, the pressure from the neighbors, it all felt like a mountain she couldn't climb. She stared into the coffee, wishing for an escape, even if just for a moment. Her phone buzzed on the table, snapping her out of her thoughts. It was a message from her old friend, Clara, someone she hadn't spoken to in a while, but had always trusted. "Hey, Janice, I heard things have been tough. Let's grab coffee today. My treat. You need a break." Janice hesitated. Clara had always been good at seeing things clearly. cutting through the noise. And right now, Janice needed clarity. With a deep breath, she texted back, "Sure, let's meet at the usual place." Later that afternoon, Janice sat across from Clara at their favorite cafe, the hum of conversation and the clinking of mugs providing a comforting background. Clara had a way of putting people at ease, her warm smile and no-nonsense attitude making her one of the few people Janice could be vulnerable with. "So," Clara began, taking a sip of her coffee, "spill. What's going on?" Janice sighed, rubbing her temples as she recounted the past few months, the rumors, Ben's advances, the tension with Jelly, and the strain it had put on her marriage. As she spoke, Clara listened intently, her eyes narrowing at the mention of Ben. When Janice finished, Clara set her cup down and leaned forward. "Janice, you've always been someone who values family and loyalty, but this situation? It's not about family anymore. It's about respect." Janice blinked, caught off guard by Clara's bluntness. "What do you mean?" "I mean, you've been bending over backward to keep the peace, to protect Jelly's feelings and not rock the boat with Ben. But in doing that, you've forgotten to protect yourself and your marriage." Clara's voice was firm but compassionate. Janice looked down, her fingers tracing the rim of her coffee cup. "I just don't want to make things worse. Jelly, she's my sister. I don't want to lose her." Clara nodded, her expression softening. "I get that. But Janice, the more you let Ben's behavior slide, the more power you give him. He's already caused a rift between you and Jelly, and now it's affecting your marriage. You need to stand up for yourself, set boundaries, make it clear to everyone, especially to Ben, that you won't tolerate this kind of treatment." Janice swallowed hard, her chest tightening. She had never been one to cause a scene, always opting to keep the peace, even when it meant sacrificing her own comfort. But Clara was right. If she didn't stand up for herself, who would? "What if Jelly doesn't believe me?" Janice asked quietly. "Then that's on her," Clara said, her voice soft but resolute. "You can't control what Jelly believes, but you can control how you handle this. And right now, it sounds like you need to take a stand for yourself, for your marriage, and for your kids." Janice nodded slowly, the weight of Clara's words sinking in. She had been so focused on protecting everyone else that she had forgotten to protect herself. It was time to change that. Meanwhile, Michael found himself sitting in a bar with his colleague, Jason, who had been working alongside him for years. Jason was a gruff, no-nonsense type of guy, but he had a way of cutting through Michael's guarded nature. "You've been quiet, man," Jason said, sipping his beer as they watched the sunset over the horizon. "Something eating at you?" Michael hesitated before sighing heavily. "It's complicated. Things at home aren't great. There are rumors about Janice and, well, her brother-in-law. It's making me question everything." Jason raised an eyebrow. "Her brother-in-law, that's tough, so what's your gut telling you?" "That's the problem," Michael said, rubbing the back of his neck. "My gut says Janice wouldn't do anything to hurt me. But then I saw some photos, and the rumors. It's hard not to doubt." Jason was quiet for a moment, taking a long sip of his drink. "I get it. Trust is a fragile thing. But here's the thing, Michael. You've been married to Janice for years, right? You've built a life together, raised kids together. Is that the kind of foundation that crumbles at the first sign of doubt?" Michael looked out at the sea, his mind swirling with thoughts. "I don't know. Maybe. Or maybe," Jason continued, "you're letting other people's opinions get in your head. You hired a private investigator, sure. But what's more important? What some PI dug up, or what you know deep down about Janice? About your marriage?" Michael frowned. "I want to trust her. But what if I'm wrong? What if she's been hiding something?" Jason shrugged. "Then you deal with it when it comes. But if you go into this expecting betrayal, you'll see it in everything. Trust isn't about ignoring the evidence. It's about choosing to believe in the person you love until they give you a real reason not to. Not rumors, not gossip, but solid, undeniable proof." Michael was quiet for a long time, Jason's words settling into his mind. He had been so focused on the photos, the rumors, and the private investigator's findings that he had forgotten what mattered most, his relationship with Janice. Their bond. Maybe Jason was right. Maybe it was time to stop letting the doubts and rumors control him and start trusting what he knew deep down about Janice. As Janice left the cafe and Michael sat in the bar, Both of them were beginning to realize something important. They were stronger together than they were apart, but only if they could rebuild the trust that had been shaken. With the support of their friends, they both knew they had difficult decisions to make, but for the first time in a long time, they felt a glimmer of hope. Now, they just had to take the first steps toward healing. It was a perfect day for a family gathering. Sunlight poured over the backyard, where long tables were set up with food, and the kids ran around playing tag. The air was filled with laughter and the smell of grilled meats. But for Janice, the tension was palpable. Michael stood beside her, his hand resting on her shoulder, offering a quiet but reassuring presence. Despite the festive atmosphere, Janice felt the weight of the unresolved issues between her, Jelly, and Ben bearing down on her. She knew today could either bring some healing or make things worse. Jelly had been distant for weeks, ever since their last difficult conversation about Ben. Though they still spoke, their interactions felt strained, as if Jelly were holding back something. Ben, on the other hand, had been uncharacteristically aloof toward Janice since their confrontation, yet he hovered near Jelly like a protective shadow. As the afternoon went on, Janice tried to stay focused on her kids, James, Lucy, and Brody, who were excited to be with their cousins. But she couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to erupt. Her eyes kept drifting toward Jelly and Ben, who stood by the grill, exchanging whispers. Michael, sensing her anxiety, squeezed her shoulder gently. "You all right?" he asked in a low voice. Janice nodded, but her lips tightened. "I just have a bad feeling about today. It's like everyone's pretending things are fine, but they're not." Michael glanced over at Ben and Jelly, then back to Janice. "If things start to get out of hand, we'll handle it together." The gathering continued, and as the sun dipped lower in the sky, people began to settle into groups, chatting and laughing. Janice was speaking with her cousin when she overheard Ben's voice. His tone was louder than usual, and something about it caught her attention. "Look, I've always been there for this family," Ben was saying, addressing a small group that included Jelly and a few other relatives. "I help out whenever I can, whether it's for Jelly or Janice and the kids." Janice stiffened, knowing this wasn't a casual comment. Michael, who had been talking with one of the kids, noticed her shift in mood and followed her gaze. Ben's voice was steady, but there was an edge to it that made Janice uneasy. "I just don't get it," Ben continued, his voice taking on a mock innocent tone. "You try to do the right thing and people start questioning your intentions. Isn't family supposed to be about trust?" Jelly looked uncomfortable, her eyes darting to Janice and then back to Ben. Janice could see her sister's internal conflict, the tension between her love for Ben and the creeping doubts that had taken root. Janice felt her chest tighten. She knew Ben was trying to paint himself as the victim, but after everything that had happened, she wasn't about to let that narrative stand. She glanced at Michael, who gave her a small nod, encouraging her to speak up if she wanted to. Taking a deep breath, Janice approached the group, her heart pounding in her chest. "Ben," she said, her voice steady but loud enough for the others to hear. "Are you implying something?" Everyone fell silent. Ben turned to face her, his eyes narrowing ever so slightly, though he maintained a polite smile. "No, Janice, I'm not implying anything. I'm just saying that it's when people start assuming the worst about you when all you've ever done is try to help." Jelly looked from Ben to Janice, her expression tense. "Janice," she said softly, "maybe this isn't the right time." But Janice wasn't about to back down. "I appreciate help when it comes from a genuine place," she said, looking directly at Ben. "But lately, the way you've been acting has made me uncomfortable, and I don't think I'm the only one who feels that way." Ben's smile faltered, and he took a step closer to her. "Uncomfortable? What are you trying to say, Janice? That I'm some kind of threat?" The tone in his voice was sharper now, defensive, and the group around them watched with a mix of curiosity and apprehension. Janice stood her ground, her hands clenched at her sides. "I'm saying that boundaries exist for a reason, and it's become clear to me that you've crossed them." Michael was now standing beside her, his posture protective but calm. "We're all here as family," Michael said, his voice steady. "But if someone makes you uncomfortable, it's important to address it. No one's accusing you of anything, Ben, but feelings need to be respected." Ben's face reddened with anger, but before he could say anything else, Jelly stepped forward, her voice shaky but firm. "Ben," she said, her eyes pleading, "this isn't about loyalty or trust. It's about how things have changed. You've been different lately, and I've noticed it too. I just didn't want to admit it." The tension that had been simmering beneath the surface suddenly erupted. The discomfort in Jelly's voice, the unease in the air, everything seemed to coalesce into one sharp moment of confrontation. Ben's gaze darted between Janice, Jelly, and Michael, his bravado faltering as he realized he was being cornered. "I haven't done anything wrong," Ben snapped. "I've been nothing but a good brother-in-law, a good partner to Jelly. And now I'm the bad guy? I can't believe this." But Jelly, tears welling in her eyes, stepped in front of him. "Ben, please, don't make this harder than it has to be. We've all noticed the way you've been acting, and it's not just about Janice. It's about us, too. Something's changed, and I can't ignore it anymore." The rest of the family, sensing the growing intensity of the argument, began to drift away from the group, giving them space. Ben looked at Jelly, his face a mixture of hurt and frustration. "So, what? You're taking her side now?" Jelly shook her head. "I'm not taking sides. I just need you to understand that what's been happening between us, whatever it is, it's been affecting everyone, and I can't stand by and let it go on without addressing it." For a moment, no one spoke. The tension hung thick in the air, and Janice could feel her heart pounding in her chest. She hadn't wanted things to come to this, but she knew it was necessary. The issues between them couldn't be ignored any longer. Ben finally let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head. "Fine. If that's how you all feel, then maybe I'm the problem." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving Jelly standing there, her face pale and tear-streaked. The family gathering that had begun with so much joy now ended with a somber sense of unease. Janice stepped forward, her heart aching for her sister. "Jelly? I'm sorry." Jelly looked at her, her expression filled with sadness and exhaustion. "I know, Janice, I know you didn't want this to happen." The two sisters stood there in silence, the weight of the confrontation still hanging over them. There was no easy solution to what had just unfolded, but for the first time in a long while, the truth was out in the open. And maybe, just maybe, that was the first step toward healing. Chapter 19. The air was thick with tension as the family gathering came to a close, but the events of the day still lingered, unresolved. Janice sat at the dining table, her mind racing with everything that had transpired. The confrontation with Ben earlier in the day had stirred up emotions she had been bottling up for too long. Now, with the kids finally asleep and the house quiet, she knew there was no avoiding the conversation that was about to happen. Jelly, who had remained mostly quiet since Ben's outburst, sat on the couch, her arms wrapped around herself as if trying to shield herself from the inevitable. Janice could see the turmoil written all over her sister's face: hurt, confusion, and something else: fear. Michael, standing in the doorway, watched silently, his presence grounding Janice. He had been her rock through this mess, and she knew she couldn't have faced any of this without him by her side. But now it was time to speak the truth, no matter how painful it might be. Janice took a deep breath and finally broke the silence. "Jelly, we need to talk." Jelly's eyes darted toward her, her expression cautious. "About what?" "About Ben," Janice said, her voice steady but soft. "About what's been happening." Jelly shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her eyes dropping to the floor. "Janice, I know things have been strange lately. But Ben, he wouldn't." Janice shook her head gently. "Please, just listen to me. This is hard for me to say, but I can't stay silent any longer. I've tried to ignore it for the sake of family. I've tried to convince myself that maybe I was overreacting, but Ben has been making advances toward me, Jelly." The words hung in the air, heavy and sharp. Jelly's head snapped up, her eyes wide in disbelief. "What? No, that can't be true. Ben loves me, Janice. He wouldn't do something like that." "I wish I were wrong," Janice continued, her voice wavering slightly. "I've tried to tell myself that it was just him being overly friendly, that I was imagining things, but it wasn't just once, Miss Jelly. It's been happening for a while. He's been saying things, doing things that have made me deeply uncomfortable." Jelly's face paled, her hands shaking as she clutched a throw pillow. "You're mistaken. You must be. He wouldn't do that to you. To me." Janice's heart ached for her sister, but she couldn't let this go unsaid any longer. I confronted him about it, Jelly. I told him to stop, but instead of apologizing, he became more aggressive. He even suggested that we have an affair. Jelly gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. No, that can't be true. Her voice was breaking now, tears welling in her eyes. I have been trying to tell you this, but you won't believe me, Janice said, her own eyes filling with tears. I know you love Ben, but you deserve to know the truth. Jelly stood abruptly, her whole body trembling. You're lying. Ben wouldn't do that. He's been there for me through everything. Why would he betray me like that? Michael, who had remained silent until now, stepped forward. Jelly, I've seen the way Ben has been acting. I didn't want to believe it either, but Janice isn't lying. She's been struggling with this for a long time. Jelly shook her head furiously, backing away from both of them. No, this is some kind of mistake. You're trying to tear my family apart. Janice stood and walked toward her sister, her heart breaking with every step. Jelly, I would never hurt you like this. I love you. But Ben, he crossed a line. I need you to believe me. Jelly's tears flowed freely now, her body trembling with the weight of the truth. How could he? How could you let this happen? Janice reached out to her, but Jelly pulled back, her face a mask of pain and betrayal. I didn't want it, Jelly. I didn't ask for it. But I couldn't pretend anymore. You deserve better than this. At that moment, the front door creaked open and Ben stepped inside. His eyes swept across the room, taking in the scene. Jelly in tears, Janice and Michael standing before her. His expression hardened immediately, as if he understood exactly what had just been said. What's going on? Ben asked, his voice tight with suspicion. Jelly turned to him, her face a mixture of rage and devastation. Is it true, Ben? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Did you make advances toward Janice? Did you suggest an affair? Ben's face darkened, his eyes narrowing at Janice. I don't know what she's been telling you, but this is all some kind of misunderstanding. Is it? Michael stepped forward, his voice low and menacing. Because we've all seen the way you've been acting around her, Ben, and now Janice is telling us the truth. What do you have to say for yourself? Ben scoffed, crossing his arms defensively. This is ridiculous. I was just trying to help Janice out. She's been under a lot of stress, and I was there for her. That's all. That's not all, Janice said, her voice trembling with emotion. You crossed a line, Ben. You said things, did things that were completely inappropriate. Jelly looked at him, her eyes filled with anguish. Ben, I need you to tell me the truth, right now. For a long moment, Ben remained silent, his eyes darting between Jelly and Janice. Then, finally, he sighed and threw his hands up in the air. Fine. I admit it. Maybe I said some things I shouldn't have, but it was all just talk. It didn't mean anything. Jelly's face crumpled, and she let out a sob. How could you? How could you do this to me? Ben stepped toward her, his expression softening. Jelly, it was a mistake. I was confused, okay? I didn't mean to hurt you. But Jelly shook her head, backing away from him. No, this isn't something you can just brush off as a mistake. You betrayed me. You betrayed our family. Janice stood silently, tears streaming down her face as she watched her sister's world crumble. She wanted to comfort her, but she knew there were no words that could fix the pain Jelly was feeling. Michael, standing beside Janice, placed a reassuring hand on her back. We'll get through this, he whispered. All of us. But as Jelly's sobs filled the room, Janice wondered how they would ever heal from the damage that had been done. Ben opened his mouth to respond, but Janice spoke before he could. Her voice was steady but laced with emotion. This wasn't just about a family connection, Ben. You've been manipulating this situation, trying to take advantage of our relationship, and I refuse to let you do that. But it wasn't easy for me to stay silent, especially because I didn't want to hurt Jelly. Jelly turned to Janice, her face still streaked with tears. For the first time, she looked at her sister not with suspicion, but with understanding. It was clear now that Janice had been trapped, struggling between protecting her sister and standing up for herself. The realization brought Jelly a new wave of grief, but also a sense of clarity. I'm so sorry, Jelly whispered, stepping toward Janice. I should have seen what was happening. I should have believed you. Janice shook her head, tears falling freely now. You couldn't have known. I didn't even want to believe it myself. The two sisters stood facing each other, their bond strained and tested, now stronger than ever. In that moment, they both understood that despite everything, their relationship as sisters was far more important than any man's betrayal. Ben, sensing that his manipulations were failing, tried once more to salvage the situation. "Jelly, come on, we've been through so much together, don't throw away our marriage over this misunderstanding." But Jelly was no longer the same woman who had been willing to overlook his faults. She squared her shoulders, wiping the last of her tears away. "No, Ben, you threw our marriage away the moment you thought you could have something with my sister. I'm done." Ben's face twisted in frustration, but he seemed to know there was no saving himself now. Without another word, he stormed toward the door, slamming it behind him as he left. The sound of the door closing echoed through the room, but instead of tension, there was now a sense of release, a weight lifted from all their shoulders. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, there was peace. Jelly turned back to Janice, her face softening. "I don't know how I'm going to move forward from this, but I know I can't do it without you." Janice smiled, her heart swelling with gratitude and love for her sister. "You won't have to do it alone. We'll figure this out together." Michael walked over, placing a reassuring hand on both their shoulders. "We're family, and we'll get through this, all of us." The three of them stood together in silence for a moment, the weight of what had just transpired still settling. But despite the pain, there was a renewed sense of hope, a belief that even in the darkest of times, family could still stand strong. With Ben out of the picture and the truth laid bare, Janice and Jelly knew they had a long road ahead. But they also knew that no matter what came next, they would face it together. Stronger, united, and ready to rebuild their lives. Chapter 20. As the sun peeked through the curtains, casting a warm glow across the living room, Janice and Michael sat together on the couch, the air filled with a renewed sense of hope. It was a new morning, a fresh start, and the chaos of the past few months began to fade into the background. "Can you believe he's gone?" Janice asked, her voice tinged with disbelief. "I didn't think we'd ever get to this point." Michael smiled, reaching for her hand. "Honestly, I thought we'd be stuck in that cycle forever. But now it feels like we have a chance to really focus on us." With Ben out of the picture, the tension that had weighed heavily on their relationship began to lift. Janice felt lighter, free from the burden of betrayal, and Michael could sense a change in her demeanor. They had both endured so much, but now it was time to embrace the possibilities ahead. "Let's do something today," Michael suggested, his eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. "Just the two of us. We can take the kids to the park or go out for breakfast. What do you think?" Janice's face brightened at the idea. "That sounds amazing. It feels like we haven't spent quality time together in ages. Let's do it." They quickly organized their morning, packing snacks and ensuring the kids were dressed and ready. As they stepped outside hand in hand, Janice felt a surge of happiness. It was a simple gesture, but it felt monumental. At the park, the children ran ahead, laughing and playing, while Janice and Michael found a quiet bench under a shady tree. For the first time in months, they felt at ease, watching their kids enjoy the freedom of childhood. "Look at them," Janice said, her heart swelling with pride. "They're so happy." "They deserve this," Michael replied, leaning closer to her. "And we do too. We've been through so much, but we're finally finding our way back to each other." Janice nodded, feeling a deep sense of gratitude for Michael's unwavering support. "I can't tell you how much it means to me that you're here, ready to rebuild. I know I haven't always made it easy." "Neither have I," Michael admitted. "But what's important is that we're both committed to making this work. I want to be the partner you deserve, Janice. Let's make an effort to communicate better, to support each other through everything." "I want that too," Janice replied, her eyes sparkling with determination. "Let's start fresh, with open hearts and honesty. I want us to be able to talk about anything without fear or doubt." Michael smiled, his heart full. "Agreed. And let's find ways to have fun again. Date nights, family outings, anything that brings us closer." As they talked, they reminisced about their early days together, the adventures that had brought them joy and laughter. They shared stories and dreams, reigniting the flame that had dimmed during the tumultuous times. After a few hours at the park, they decided to take the kids for ice cream. Janice felt a lightness in her heart as they all laughed and enjoyed their treats. It was a small moment, but it filled her with hope for the future. Later that evening, after the kids were tucked in bed, Janice and Michael settled on the couch with a movie. The familiar closeness enveloped them, and they exchanged knowing glances, silently acknowledging the progress they had made. "I love this," Janice said softly, resting her head on Michael's shoulder. "Just being here with you, it feels right." "Me too," Michael whispered, wrapping his arm around her. "No matter what we faced, I never stopped loving you. It's always been you." The end. If you're enjoying the love stories here on True Hearts Presents, don't forget to subscribe. By subscribing, you'll never miss an update, and you'll be the first to know when we drop new romantic tales that will sweep you off your feet. Hit that notification bell too, so you'll get alerted whenever we post fresh content. Let's keep this journey of love going together. Subscribe now and stay tuned for more heartfelt stories.